Welcome, you're watching the news track. I'm Rahul Kanwal. The government has come out with a radical new scheme for recruitment into the armed forces. The scheme is called Agnipath. The government thinks it's a game changer because the average age profile of the armed forces will come down. Young people will be trained in the ways of the military. There are many who've been in the armed forces and those in India's opposition who are very concerned. They think that you shouldn't be trying to save costs when it comes to the armed forces, and that this could create a big group of people who in their mid-20s are then out in civilian street not knowing what to do next. Is this a game changer or a bad idea? That's my big focus on the news track tonight.
Red letter day for Indian military. Radical Agnipath scheme announced. Tour of duty for short stint soldiers. Dynamic scheme divides military community. Is Agnipath too risky for today's India? Military game changer or gamble?
We have a power-packed broadcast lined up tonight. Here are the headlines I'm tracking this evening. Rahul Gandhi back at the Enforcement Directorate for the fourth round of grilling. He's been questioned now for 7 hours already. ED sources say RG is being evasive in his answers. India today confronts Sidhu Moosewala mastermind. Gangster Lawrence Bishnoi evades questions. Maharashtra authorities say that his gang planned to extort money from businessmen and actors in Mumbai. After India today reported the horrific ordeal of 19-year-old Muslim teen who was slapped, thrashed and assaulted by a mob for backing Nupur Sharma, cops book 125 people. Prime Minister Modi hails India's freedom fighters in Mumbai, hails Shivaji's legacy as he shares the stage with Maharashtra Chief Minister Uddhav Thackeray. Brand IPL gets bigger, hits a new record with media rights being sold for over 48,000 crore rupees. Viacom 18 bags digital rights. Star India gets TV rights for India. One of the world's largest and most professional militaries is all set for a brand new chapter. The government has called this new scheme Agnipath, a brand new short-term recruitment policy for Indian youth to serve in the armed forces. But the dynamic scheme has divided the military community. Is this a game changer or a big gamble? Here's our lead story.
One of the world's largest and most professional military forces, renowned globally for its abilities, responsibilities and grit, is all set for a brand new chapter. The government has called it Agnipath, the path of fire. Don't be fooled by the Bollywood style name, because this is serious business. First, let's tell you what it is. Aimed at recasting the Indian military as leaner, meaner, and to cut down India's enormous military salary and pension bills, Agnipath is a brand new short-term recruitment policy for Indian youth to serve as soldiers in the armed forces. After weeks of debate and speculation, this tour of duty scheme was unveiled on Tuesday by the country's military leadership.
Assimilation and integration of the Agniveers into the system is an important aspect, and that is something which we are working at.
नौसेना की अग्निवीर स्कीम में महिलाएं भी शामिल होंगी.
The new scheme therefore gives the Air Force an opportunity to draw from the vast pool of talent available in the country so that they can serve in the nation's armed forces with pride.
Projected as a transformative initiative, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh described the benefits of the scheme.
अग्निपथ योजना के अंतर्गत यह प्रयास किया जा रहा है कि इंडियन आर्म्ड फोर्सेस का प्रोफाइल पूरी तरह से यूथफुल हो। यूथफुल प्रोफाइल से यह फायदा भी होगा कि उन्हें नई नई टेक्नोलॉजी के लिए आसानी से ट्रेन किया जा सकेगा और उनकी हेल्थ और फिटनेस का लेवल भी काफी बेहतर होगा।
Agnipath will induct youth aged between 17.5 to 21 into the armed forces as Agniveers on a salary of between 30 to 40,000 per month for a period of 4 years. They will then be released from service without pension but with a severance of up to 12 lakh rupees. About a quarter of all Agniveers will be retained in service if they choose to on merit. The Agnipath scheme has been announced, but the journey to it has been a turbulent one and remains fraught with contentious warnings from the veteran community who believe that the good intentions of the scheme will not be met or solved by it, but rather prove disastrous to the military in the medium term.
मेडिकल बेनिफिट या कोई कैंटीन बेनिफिट या कोई किसी प्रकार का बेनिफिट नहीं होगा। उनको केवल सर्टिफिकेट दिए जाएंगे जो कागज़ के टुकड़े हैं और कहा जा रहा है कि उनकी बदौलत शायद उनको कॉर्पोरेट वर्ल्ड जो है एब्जॉर्ब कर लेगा, शायद उनको पैरामिलिट्री फोर्सेस एब्जॉर्ब कर लेगी। पैरामिलिट्री फोर्सेस में भी बहुत बड़े पैमाने पर ऑपोजिशन होगा।
The systemic view is that radical reform in a regimented institution like the military is always going to be difficult. But the counter-argument is that the military is not a space for cost-cutting experiments, especially given India's unique and vast security challenges from all sides. Finally, there is a worry that Agnipath doesn't have a rollback mechanism. Will it prove to be the necessary game changer it is projected as, or a risky gamble with the country's highest institutions? Bureau Report, India Today.
So will this scheme be a game changer of sorts, motivating thousands of youngsters to the ways of the military? Or could this prove to be deeply problematic because in just 4 years' time, can you integrate a young soldier fully in the ways of the Paltan? Ultimately, in war, it is subunit cohesion that matters. Will he feel motivated to potentially have to give up his life if he knows that this is just a 4-year gig and then after that he's back on CV Street? Joining us to talk about this radical new proposal, we've got Lieutenant General S.L. Narasimhan, member of the National Security Advisory Board. We've got Air Marshal Anil Chopra, Director General of the Center for Air Power Studies. Air Marshal P.S. Aluwalia joins us, former Air Officer Commanding-in-Chief of the Western Air Command. Ajay Shukla joins us, leading Defence and Strategic Affairs expert. We've got Gaurav Bhatia with us for a perspective from the BJP and the government on what's being done and why. And for a perspective from the Congress, we have Wing Commander Anuma Acharya, retired officer representing the Congress on this broadcast. I want to go across to General Narasimhan first for his professional view on whether this Agnipath scheme will actually help the army become lighter, more agile, more battle ready, instead of just increasing the size of India's standing army. You're finding a way of recruiting new Jawans and yet ensuring that the overall standing army size doesn't keep going up. General Narasimhan.
Thank you very much, Rahul, for getting me on this show. This is a path-breaking kind of a change that has come up. And as was mentioned in your initial remarks, it is always difficult to implement such programs into the military. My point is this. The positive aspects have already been mentioned by you. I don't want to go over it again. And we all know change is the only constant in life. So the thing that we need to look at is and this project has already gone through many iterations and also looked at many countries, how they manage this. So there are examples which have been taken up. And so what I would suggest is, before condemning it, before even it starts, I think we should give it a fair chance for it to succeed. Take your mind back to 1985 after the Blue Star. Army itself actually revived this All India concept, etc. as a change. It didn't work out so well, and so it went back to its original roots. But I think this concept needs to be given a chance to prove itself, and if it is proved to be worthy of it, we should need to continue with it. The advantage that we are going to have, basically a young army, a technically oriented army, and also a youth which will be motivated to serve for a shorter period of time, and also released to the civilian world to take on the challenges of the civilian world at a later stage. I, for one, believe this project needs to be given a chance to prove itself and then taken up further.
Ajay Shukla, what are your key concerns with this new scheme? I was looking at the defense budget from 2012 to 2021. The percentage of pension as a part of overall defense expenditure has gone up from 18% to 28%. So there's been a big jump. The government hoping that you can create employment, bring youngsters in, train them in the ways of the military, and yet ensure that your pension budget doesn't keep ballooning. General Narasimhan says, before condemning the scheme, give it an opportunity, let it prove its merit.
Rahul, I think every defense analyst in this country and several from abroad have agreed that there is a need to implement a more short-term recruitment for our armed forces, and that will bring down the pension budget and the salary budget, which you've just flagged as problems. I agree entirely with that. There is no question we have to switch to a more short service oriented recruitment pattern. And in that sense, this is a good move by the government. The only problems that I see are, first of all, before we go into the problems, let me also reassure you on one count. This is implementing the recruitment of 46,000 people for 4 years. And at the end of 4 years, year one starts retiring. So the number remains at about 192,000 soldiers. That's barely 7 or 8% of the army's strength. So this is not really, as you were mentioning, a path that once you set off on, you cannot withdraw from. If there are problems, we can always withdraw from this path. It'll take a little bit of retiring people prematurely, but it can be done. What is a potential problem area is this is being also seen as a employment generation scheme. And if we have a large number of people who are trained in weapons use and who are being retired at the end of their 4-year tenure, but not finding jobs, and that is a very real concern in the country today, because jobs are a problem even today. If they are not finding jobs, then they could well be exploited by unscrupulous elements. They could form parts of private militias. They could sort of be the strong arm of various gundas and crooks. And in that sense, we need to be very careful about what is happening to the people who retire from this scheme.
Let Gaurav Bhatia respond to these concerns. I was just running some calculations of the lower end of the range at 4.76 lakh rupees in the first year package. The typical Jawan will have a salary of about 57,000 rupees per month. Now that's a pretty decent salary, given the fact that after serving 15 years, when a Jawan goes back home and if he's given some kind of a job, whether it's at a guard or in some company, it's typically much less than 57,000 rupees. Therefore, Ajay Shukla flags the concern, Gaurav Bhatia, that you'll have people in their mid-20s, 24 to 25, 26 years of age, who would be trained in the ways of the military, who would now be back in civil street, not necessarily find employment, and they could potentially fall prey to militias, that they're fully trained and they could just go wayward, and that could create a big societal problem. How do you respond to this concern, Gaurav?
Rahul, first of all, the nation is congratulating on such a visionary program that is being introduced by Shri Narendra Modi ji, and I'll tell you the reason. There is a different thinking that is required, and we also one rank, one pension, a historical move implemented by Shri Narendra Modi ji. National War Memorial pending for decades. The monument was inaugurated by Narendra Modi ji, and now this Agnipath Yojana. I'll tell you why it's historic. First, look at the target age, 17.5 to 21. Now at 17.5, the youth who are disciplined and who have a dream and aspire to serve the country are getting a chance to be in the armed forces. Second, it would inculcate a sense of discipline in them. It will train them skillfully, even for future endeavors after the age of 21 in case they decide not to continue with this service. Third, 25%
you want to respond, Gaurav, to the question that was asked?
Candidates.
No, once again, you're counting the advantages and we set them out in the first story that I ran at the top of the show. The concern is that yes, there are certain advantages, but you have the very real prospect of 75% of these Jawans going back to society. Many of them could find it difficult to find a job because they've already tasted salaries in excess of 55,000 rupees. And therefore, Ajay Shukla raises the concern about them possibly turning to private militias or doing something which isn't right legally.
No, on the contrary, I would very respectfully disagree with him. First of all, once you've served in the army and you've served the country, the chances are even when you are disassociated and you are looking for a job, the feeling of patriotism, the sense of living for the nation will always be there, the sense of discipline. And let's also not forget, in this scheme, there is an endeavor to harness benefits of Skill India program as well. So what would it do? 25% of the selected candidates would be considered for permanent appointment. Second, the remaining 75%, Rahul, are far better off because they are trained, they are disciplined, and yes, even the government will promote them with other schemes. So there is this no fear of they joining the unruly
Ajay Shukla, respond to the point that Gaurav Bhatia makes, because why assume that they will go wayward? Instead, once a Fauji, always a Fauji. After having been part of a regimented, disciplined life, chances are that that person will be better trained than he would have been otherwise. Unemployment is a problem in any case. It's not as if, unemployment will go away just because of the scheme. Some of them may be unemployed. Many of them will have employment. This will also, as they say in the NDA, that banda ban jata hai. At the end of the training process, after having served for 4 years in the army, you are set for life because you've been molded in the ways of the Indian Armed Forces.
Rahul, I sort of I agree with the fact that discipline is inculcated in soldiers, and I agree with the fact that they are patriotic and they are sort of have the welfare of the country at heart. That having been said, these are also people who require employment, people who require good jobs, and their expectations based on the salary that they've received for the previous 4 years is even higher than the normal person who's entering the job market. Now, if they enter the job market and they do not find a job, that is a problem. They are susceptible then to all kinds of emotions and all kinds of offers that might come their way. If they do find a job, that's wonderful. They'll do the job better than most. They'll be good patriotic employees. The problem is a lot of people today, and I'm talking about today now, not just the people who are joining the scheme, there's a problem of finding employment.
No, but that's a catch-22 situation, Marshal Chopra, because yes, you may not possibly find a job after you retire, but you may not find a job when you come out of university or college either. So yes, unemployment is a reality. This is not the ultimate solution, but it's a step in that direction. And therefore, just because some of them may not get employment doesn't mean that we don't try and make the army lighter, more agile, and bring down the combat age.
You asked me, okay.
Yes,
so,
Marshal Chopra.
Undoubtedly, the whole scheme is working towards one single area, that is youthful, tech-savvy, futuristic force. Now, that core issue must be kept in mind, that it is going to bring the age down from 32 to 24, 25, 26 years, which is, I think, damn good. That all the three services are tech-savvy, and all the three services need younger people. Many countries where similar schemes have been tried, in Singapore, in South Korea, in Israel, in Sweden, is working beautifully. So I think, let's be very clear, the future war is going to be on cyber. These young people do a much better job. So I think the issue about the basics of the scheme is, now when Ajay says that, these guys will go back outside, they won't get jobs, they're not getting jobs as it is before also. So now they'll go back with higher motivation, higher status of training, chances of getting a job will increase. And they're not going to become gunslingers. They're not going to be carrying an arm along with them when they leave the service. They'll have to buy an arm. So it's a very, very different ball game. And I personally feel once a guy has been trained in the military, he's not going to become a gunslinger outside, not going to become a terrorist overnight. Of course, if he has to become, there'll be a rare, instance. My second point I want to mention is about the financial aspect of it. We had a great detailed briefing. 40 of us veterans were called, and we tried to, we really grilled the armed forces, the chiefs, the vice chiefs, everybody was present in that briefing, and we asked them all these kinds of questions. And I will tell you, first 10 years, there going to be no big change in savings. The savings will accrue only after 10 years. The pension budgets are more or less stabilizing after OROP. I think they're not going up so much. The percentage increase is much lesser vis-a-vis the capital budget, which has gone on, increased in the last 10 years.
Can I just point out the data there? The defense pensions, which was sub 50,000 crore rupees in 2012, have now gone up to more than 100,000 crore rupees in the budget estimates of 23. And the percentage of increase year on year has been in the range of about 40% in some years. So there's a big jump after one rank, one pension came into play. And that is the reality. And that's visible in your budget, in your defense budgets.
Incorrect to look at figures from 2012, because in between pay commission happened, OROP happened. Look at the budgets for last 4 years to see how the capital budgets have been increasing and how the pension budgets are going to increase. So my contention is the financial aspects are not a big issue. There will be long-term savings, but it's not the killer. The country's economy is going big. The defense budgets will. And these savings, if at all, they will take place. They will go away to the Consolidated Fund of India, and there is not going to. But the capital budget will be increased because of the demands, like every year that they are increasing. So I think we are getting a little mixed up. The core issue is get a youthful profile. I am telling you, they will get good jobs outside. In aviation sector is booming outside. We are going to become an MRO hub. We have got such a large number of airports today. And I know many of our engineers who are heading small companies. They are employing a large number of airmen as far as Air Force is concerned. We also know the naval officers and the personnel who have been going into shipping. So there is
here is the concern. Marshal Ahluwalia, can you in 4 years integrate a new Jawan adequately into the ways of the Paltan for him to stand and fight and possibly give up his life if he knows after these 4 years, A, he won't get any pension, B, that he's pretty much on his own? Would he think of it as just another employment, a 4-year stint, or will he, like those who serve for a longer period in the army, have that do or die spirit in him, which means that if the enemy rains bullets, he's firing and fighting back because his life depends on it, and he knows that the country will stand for him?
I think it's very surprising that we are having a conversation in which the money and financial aspects come in, the younger generation to be given jobs, the younger generation to be trained. These are all very good. It's a good attitude by the government to get into it. However, the bottom line is that the armed forces are meant to fight wars. In wars, there are no second best. And if you spend your time without consolidating and go into operations, you are going to come out a loser. I would like to go back to what the National Defense Academy is. What do you teach these youngsters? What do you teach your child at home? How do you build the foundation? And these are the same people whose foundation has to be built on what? Integrity, loyalty, commitment, professionalism. Now, these are things that require time, effort, and they have to be inculcated into the bodies that are going to come into the service. That takes time. I think we will have to consider perhaps giving them more time. This is a good concept to have conscripts, take them in and let them go into the public sector after that. That's fair enough. However, what you need is very solid foundation.
Okay, that's a good point you make, Marshal. I want General Narasimhan to respond, because if you look at the Russia-Ukraine war, part of the problems of the Russian army is because they've been using conscripts against the Ukrainian army, and the conscripts haven't been able to get the job done. This whole aspect that the army is not an employment scheme. You need people who have this karo ya maro, do or die kind of attitude, which only comes with time. And once you're fully integrated with the ethos of your Paltan, it doesn't come if you're in and out for 4 years, where this is just one job in a career full of many.
I'll make 3 or 4 points in 30 seconds. The
Yes,
question which Ajay Shukla posed, please understand they're also going out with the Seva Nidhi. Even if they don't get a job, they may be able to start something on their own by taking other loans, etc., as SME, etc. That is one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is about what Air Marshal Ahluwalia mentioned. I am sure he'll recall his days in NDA. After about 3 or 6 months in the NDA, if even a cadet wanted to change the squadron, how much a fight used to go on not to change that squadron. So it takes time, I agree, but it is also doesn't take so much of time to motivate the people. That is the second point. Third point is on the Russia-Ukraine war. The reason why the Russian armed forces conscripts have not done well is a different ballgame altogether. If you analyze it, they were not prepared for this war. They were not told that they are going to be a war, and they didn't prepare for it, they didn't train for it. That is a different reason. But also look at the Chinese army and the other armed forces, where the conscripts have been exceptionally doing well. So let us not go into that argument.
How do you say they're doing well? They haven't seen combat since the Vietnam War. We don't know how they'll fare in war.
Just 1 second. The issue is this, and the fourth point will actually substantiate what I am saying now. The fourth point is, even today, in any organization, starting from, say, section to battalion to beyond, you look at the ratio of the experienced soldier to the new combatants who have come in. The ratio remains 1:4, almost. So I would suggest that instead of saying that the conscripts will not do well, let us give them a chance to do well first, and then we can see as to what to do with it.
Marshal Ahluwalia, why assume that conscripts won't be able to fight just as well as the regular standing army?
That wasn't my point, and I'd like to correct the general that people like me haven't spent 6 months more. It's just 3 years of training in the NDA. But whatever said and done, I am making a point that the foundations, the training of the personnel in uniform is very important to get a commitment and to get a good grade of professionalism. And therefore, I think these are all unnecessary arguments about skill levels and about having a younger force, etc. Because in war, there is no second best. In fact, in Kargil, if you remember, it was the soldiers who had the training, who could climb those heights because they were determined, they were loyal. They wanted to do it. They wanted to fly the flag, the Indian flag, right atop Tiger Hill. And that is what I am worried about, that whether we be able to inculcate this sense of belonging, this camaraderie, that is the cornerstones, that is the foundation of any military organization. And the Air Force will suffer even more.
Let Air Marshal Chopra respond to that. That will you in 4 years be able to inculcate enough of an esprit de corps for this young Jawan to be willing to give up his life? Because if it's just 4 years and I know that I'm off after 4, then do I just think of this as just another job rather than my calling in life, rather than looking at it from the perspective of standing up for my country, standing up for my Paltan, fighting with the soldiers who are by my side? I just think of it as an opportunity to finish my service and then wait for the next big job.
No, I disagree over here. If you see the Kargil war, the people who really, the guys who got the Paramveer Chakras were 2 years, 3 years service. So this guy is, to say that these very young guys will not be motivated. So what if he's just done 6 months training? It doesn't require 6 months, more than 6 months training for the kind of job you're going to assign him. We're going to give him a frontline job. He's going to touch the aircraft. He'll work on the aircraft, but he'll not do a second line type of a work. So my contention is the training time is adequate. We will be able to motivate them. They will fight. And they will fight like any good warrior. All young warriors have done very well in all the previous wars. So my second point, which I want to make, Rahul, which we have not discussed till now, is, and which is important, is, the government and the armed forces were very conscious that there will be some teething problems. There will be issues that need to be solved. So what the CCS has said in the document when they've signed, they gave the final approval to the scheme, is that the reviews will be done not at the CCS level. The review of the scheme will be done at RM and the chiefs level, and the RM and chiefs will have the authority to make amends to the scheme as they go along. So that's a big thing that has been factored in, which is a very big thing, and there will be issues which will get sorted out. The three chiefs briefed us this morning that this will allow the things to be modified on a weekly basis if required. So I think
Wing Commander Acharya, the fact is that most wars now will be fought in the information warfare, tech, drone domains. We saw what happened between Armenia and Azerbaijan, where drones were used very effectively. So it's not as if you're now in a situation where there is eye-to-eye, hand-to-hand kind of combat or in trenches. We need a leaner, meaner, more agile army, and therefore any scheme which ensures that the size of our standing army actually comes down is a scheme that should be welcomed and celebrated. There may be teething problems, but you work around those problems rather than condemn the scheme. Where does the Congress come out on this?
Good evening and thank you, Rahul. I had started to wonder whether I am there to just complete your quorum. But since you have asked me and you have a background, I just wanted to ask you whether it was a political or a military decision. Because if it is a military decision, it would have discussed somewhere in the commanders' conference or within the armed forces. Or if there was a pilot project on this, if there was a pilot project, then they should tell us. Otherwise, why they have not done this pilot project on CAPF itself? They have home guards. Home guards can very well replace the police force. So why have they not experimented there instead of doing straightway with the army? Now, this press release is full of some kind of vague concept without giving any insight, perhaps for some headline management, so that for a few days the channels can discuss this and we can just do away with the actual problems. Will there be another thing which is not so clear in this? The normal entries, as in this will be the only one entry, or there will be another entry for the permanent people who will go for the pensionable service. I mean, from the entry point. Or regimental entries, have they been stopped? This is my another query. Anyway.
Okay. Let Gaurav Bhatia respond to some of this. I'm coming back to you, ma'am, in just a moment. I'm coming right back to you. You've asked many points.
You have decided not to give me time.
No, that's not fair. You're on our show the first time.
Just complete.
I must give you adequate opportunity. Yes, go on, ma'am.
Give me 30 seconds. Can I?
Yes, ma'am, you must.
Yes, I wanted to check with you from the organizational point of view, training of 6 months and then another 3 months at the end of his career. That means total 9 months or almost 1 year is gone. Then 3 years is left. In that 3 years, he completes only one tenure. You can't give him 2 tenures. Can you train him on any specialized trainings? If you can, then that is going to go waste. Then can he be given a specialized arm training? Are you going to give him access to
so let's get some responses to these questions. I'm looking at data from the Rajya Sabha Unstarred question 1650 December 21, where the government was asked, Gaurav, how many vacancies are there in the armed forces? 97,000 vacancies for JCOs and soldiers in the Army, 4,850 in the Air Force, 11,166 in the Navy, 7,000 officer vacancies in the Army, 621 Air Force vacancies, 1,265 officer vacancies in the Navy. So the charge against the government is that you haven't been recruiting and you're under pressure. You've seen protests on the issue of no recruitments into the armed forces in states like Haryana, and therefore this is like a employment generation scheme. And the argument being made is don't think of the armed forces as an employment generation scheme. You need people who are passionate to a point where they're willing to sacrifice their life for the sake of the armed forces, and somebody who served for just 4 years may not have that passion. Gaurav Bhatia.
So Rahul, I heard all the panelists, and with the utmost respect, let me respond one by one. I hope I'll not be interrupted. First of all, this feeble argument that is being given that, only 4 years of service and the person will be very young Why recruit that person? Let me just give you an example of Second Lieutenant Arun Khetrapal. He was 21-year-old, recipient of Paramveer Chakra. He served the country well. He laid down his life. And that is why this tenure argument that is being given, I don't buy that, neither would the citizens of the country.
No, but can I just
Now,
pause you
what
for
we
a
need
second?
to
Just one second.
understand, we should
Hold that thought.
compare
Gaurav, hold that thought for a second. Let me ask you a counter to this. Imagine as a young Jawan, I'm posted in Bareilly because that's where my 3-year tenure is. Suddenly, China or Pakistan decide to launch a war. This gentleman is now moved to the line of actual control or to the line of control. And now you're in high altitude. You've been trained for 6 months and you're out, say, in Bareilly. You have to fight in Tiger Hill or Tholuling. That could be a big challenge. I think that's the question that Wing Commander Acharya was asking, that you're posted in one position. Suddenly, in the case of a real combat, you will then be deployed in a different kind of terrain. Gaurav Bhatia.
Rahul, thank you for that question. Let me respond. First of all, are we assuming that our brave and the strongest army in the world of 1 million+ soldiers will not be there? Why do you assume that the integration would not happen, Rahul? And let me tell you, a study has been undertaken and I'll give you an example. Similarly, these young people are recruited in USA, where the training is 8 to 10 weeks, mark it. In France, 12 weeks. In UK, 14 weeks. We are giving them a training of 6 months and they have the commitment to serve the country well. So let's not discard the new program of the government just because you don't like the government. I think it should be given a chance and it would be very beneficial not just for the youth but also for the country and for our armed forces.
Allow me to speak. Allow me to respond.
Yes, Wing Commander Acharya. Now, once again, let's just do it one by one.
Rahul,
you've made a response. Wing Commander Acharya wants to come in and make a quick counter. I'm going to allow her to do that. This is being done in other armies as well. And if it's working in other armies, why imagine the worst for India, Wing Commander?
See, it is neither a private company nor a corporate. Here we are talking about Indian Armed Forces. And can an officer will take this person on a job? We are creating a class within the men itself. Because one side, people who are going to complete their tenure. Other side, this guy will always be looked down upon. He will always be given sundry jobs like cleaning, maintenance and things like that. Nobody will deploy him. No officer would like to take him to active line of control. So the person doesn't understand who is responding to my
Hold that thought. I want to put that question in all fairness to General Narasimhan. No, one second, Gaurav. Let a military man respond to this. No, one second. I want a military answer rather than a political answer. Let's imagine you now need to handpick a small group of people. One second, Gaurav, one second. You need to handpick, sir, a small group of soldiers for an assault on Tiger Hill. Wing Commander Acharya makes the argument, will an officer, whether it's a battery commander or a commanding officer, pick one of these Agniveers who's got lesser experience, isn't as integrated versus a person who's serving his 15 years for an audacious assault? Or will there be a class among soldiers? General Narasimhan.
That argument is valid. What I would suggest is, for a task like this, what you are suggesting and what earlier has been suggested about Tholuling, etc., you would find a combination of experience and youth. The problem is everything can't be done by experience, because if the people are older enough, they're not able to meet the exacting standards of those particular altitudes. You need to look for a combination. I am sure as an officer, I have commanded all these levels, as you are aware. As an officer who has to pick up a team, I will go by the merits of that person and not because he has been selected or not selected to continue in service. That is number one. Number two, it is also unfair on the soldier to think that he will not deliver the goods. I have not seen anybody who is even on the verge of retirement saying that I will not do this job because I'm going on retirement. Or that officer is looking down on that person saying that he's going to go on retirement and so I will not take him on the task. I think that is a misplaced kind of a assessment. As a field commander, I would go for a balanced profile, and this project, I think, will give that balanced profile that is required for any task.
Shukla, do you share Wing Commander Acharya's concern of a class amongst soldiers, that those who have longer experience would be preferred and these people who've just come in or will serve only for a few years by officers who are in charge and taking these hard calls may not trust them quite as much?
Rahul, I'm a bit mystified by this argument of young soldiers. Let us remember that even in the army as it exists today,
correct,
there are soldiers who have 1 year of service, there are
correct,
soldiers who have 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and many of them go on to become excellent soldiers in senior ranks, but their place is taken by regular soldiers who again start off at the start mark of 1 year of service. So to say that young soldiers are not as good or will not be accepted the way that older ones are is actually to sort of paint the brush with sort of the young lot that serve in the army today. That's not an argument at all. The argument, in fact, that we all need to be really worried about is post-retirement. What are you going to do with these people? Everybody is talking about how their Desh Bhakti and patriotism will, and their sort of love for the regiment will carry them through civil life. But that's not the case. The same disciplined soldier who goes out and does not get a job becomes very quickly into a frustrated person, and in this case will be a frustrated person who has had detailed arms training, which is not a good thing to do. So
okay. I want to build on the point that you make. I agree with your argument, and I want Wing Commander Acharya to respond to it, because this idea that just because you're new or freshly inducted, you'll somehow be inferior. So many of the most audacious assaults, whether it was during the Kargil war or otherwise, were actually powered by the energy and passion of our young soldiers, and therefore why hold their age or inexperience against them? In fact, I'd argue that when you're new, you are likely to be more full of josh than somebody who's seen many wars and therefore might be more circumspect. So I'm not necessarily putting anyone in danger, but to build on Ajay Shukla's point that it doesn't mean because you're new that you're handicapped.
You have misunderstood me. All I said is there is one side of people who are 25%, they are still young. They are also young. And the other one who is just that for 3 years tourist, he is also young. Who will be trusted more? I am saying both young. I am not talking about one is aged. No, I'm not talking about that. That is one. Second, you are giving them an exposure.
No, but why call him a tourist, ma'am? That's disrespectful. You've been in the armed forces yourself.
That's what
somebody
I'm saying.
Who's signing up for such rigor, who's now willing to be posted in, say, Siachen Glacier. Why call him a tourist? I don't think that's the right way to put it.
Another area. Let me bring up another point, which is like he has not made it in that 25%. And he is still doing guard duties. And he is very frustrated. He is under depression. And he is a live arm when he is doing the guard duty. If he commits suicide, I am just talking about the probability. Another thing, if he is again not made it in the 25%, if he takes out some slogans
what are we hearing?
Start protesting.
But Marshal Ahluwalia, if we look at it this way, then nobody will ever do anything, because in the odd guy, like one former army person goes on to become a dacoit in Chambal. I mean, who's to stop something like that? It doesn't mean that all of them are becoming dacoits or goons or they're joining the next Musewala gang. That's really unfair. It may happen in the odd instance. It may happen in the odd instance, but it doesn't mean that everybody is going to do the same.
It can happen to anybody then, Rahul, any category.
I think he's asked me the question, let me answer.
Yes, sir.
Rahul, there's no doubt about it that we get many, many youngsters who just join and are still very, very competent to meet the requirement of the military. However, having said that, all I'm saying is, yes, it is workable. It will be workable, but we need to do some homework. We need to assess that what is it that you want from a youngster. I spent 3 years in the National Defense Academy, much of it front rolling for no rhyme or reason. That's because that's because they wanted to change my attitude. My attitude was a little, resistance, like Mr. Marshal Chopra will know what I mean by attitude. Okay, now the thing is that if you have to train a guy, you've got to make sure that his consolidation, like they say, the child can be spoiled, like you say, unhappy childhood. If that unhappy childhood syndrome comes in, then you're going to have a major issue. So therefore, what I'm saying is, you need to do some homework in how are you going to prepare these people to where.
So let Gaurav Bhatia respond to that point. Why was this not tried as a trial scheme? Maybe in the central arm, the police forces, or with the home guards, or somewhere else, rather than implemented at scale right at the word go.
Rahul, it's not fair on part of some of the panelists here to be so pessimistic. Nobody has said that this is a rigid scheme, nothing will be changed, improvements will not be made. I must say that this is an effort to produce future Agniveers, and everybody should be proud of it. I'll tell you why. Why is it being said that how would these Agniveers be recruited or deployed? You know, it would be a fair mix. Let us leave it to the wisdom of the senior army commissioned officers. And let us also examine the other example we have of short service commission. The service tenure is 10 years. Our officers recruited in the short service commission committing suicide. Please, Rahul, I should not be interrupted.
Go on, Gaurav.
It's not very fair. Please. Yes. You know, short service commission has proved its efficacy. It's tried and tested. Can we today say that these officers who serve the country have been committing suicides, or they are there for tourism, or they are inferior to the other armed forces personnel? No. The answer is that there are different needs of the armed forces that are being catered to.
I'm out of time. We've heard different shades of opinion. All I would say as I conclude is this: it's just a new beginning. Give it time. There are possibilities that there may be tweaks that are required to ensure that it is implemented well. Ajay Shukla raises some serious concerns about what may happen if they don't get jobs once they retire. The reality is that they may not get a job even if they weren't part of the scheme. So is something better than anything at all? And isn't it better for us to have a leaner, meaner, more agile, tech-driven army rather than continuing to bloat the size of our armed forces, which is the trend globally? So there's a lot to chew on. We were able to cover a lot of ground. So I want to thank Lieutenant General Narasimhan, Air Marshal Chopra, Air Marshal Ahluwalia. You know, I just have that thought of Air Marshal Ahluwalia doing front rolls rolling through my head back in NDA. Colonel Ajay Shukla, Gaurav Bhatia and Wing Commander Anuma Acharya for making her news track debut. I apologize for coming to you last, but you are more than able to pack in a punch. So thank you. I'll have more for you when we come back on the other side of a quick break. Stay with us. We're back in a moment. India Today confronts Sidhu Moosewala murder main accused Lawrence Bishnoi. Details coming up on the other side.
सिद्धू मूसेवाला मरवाया बिश्नोई सलमान खान
India Today Group wins big again. Bags 37 awards at the NT Awards 2022. Aaj Tak triumphs with 18 awards. India Today TV with 12 awards. Aajtak.in and IndiaToday.in with 5 awards. And Good News Today with 2 awards, making the group proud once again. India Today Group, the gold standard of journalism.
Years, the focus was on economy. Now that the new GDP numbers have come in, let's have a quick look at how we have surfaced. The gross domestic product, GDP growth for the year just came in at 8.7%. Given that the GDP had contracted by 6.6% the previous year, this is certainly a good number. Now the question is, are we out of danger? As the numbers look positive, the question is, are we fully out of danger? Well, the COVID pandemic has indeed shaken India's economy. It only grew 4.1% in between the January-March period. Trade, hotels, transport and services related to broadcasting particularly is certainly the only sector that is yet to fully recover. It is still 11% below the financial year 2020's levels. The Indian economy has grown, braving the COVID-19 pandemic and the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict that's led to global inflation. But the road ahead still seems challenging. The global crude oil prices have hardened back to $120 per barrel after increased sanctions on Russian oil, making it tough for the Indian economy. Now, the surge in energy and commodity prices caused partly by the Ukraine crisis is also squeezing economic activity. A spike in retail inflation hit an 8-year high of 7.8% in April. However, the chief economic advisor has ruled out the risk of stagflation in India as the country is better placed than other nations. Stagflation is basically when both inflation and unemployment rates are high with moderation in GDP growth. Can we look forward to respite for the economy? Well, the service sector growth, that is housekeeping, tours and travels and teaching, is providing hope to the economy now. There are other bright spots too. In fact, India's factory activity expanded at a better than expected pace last month as overall demand remained resilient despite high inflation. In 2021 to 22, the agriculture sector grew by 3%, manufacturing by 9.9%, construction by 11.5%, financial services by 4.2%, trade and others by 11.1%, which is quite a positive sign. Except for crude oil and steel, all other infrastructure industries recorded positive growth. So the latest GDP figures are a mixed bag. It's difficult to say where the economy is really now headed.
You're on board the news track. Sidhu Moosewala murder mastermind Lawrence Bishnoi has now been remanded to the Punjab police custody. He will be grilled about his involvement in the singer's shootout. But before that, India Today's crime reporter Arvind Ojha confronted Bishnoi. Here's how the dreaded gangster reacted to the
The mastermind of Sidhu Moosewala murder, gangster Lawrence Bishnoi. The man who plotted the shootout that killed Moosewala is currently lodged in a Delhi jail. And as Delhi and Punjab police seek extension of his custody, India Today's ace crime reporter Arvind Ojha confronted Lawrence Bishnoi.
बिश्नोई, सलमान खान को आपने धमकी दिलवाई? हैं? सिद्धू मूसेवाला मरवाया? बिश्नोई, बिश्नोई, सलमान खान को आपने धमकी दिलवाई? हैं? सिद्धू मूसेवाला मरवाया? बिश्नोई.
When asked about masterminding the murder of Sidhu Moosewala, Bishnoi glared at the India Today reporter.
सिद्धू मूसेवाला मरवाया? बिश्नोई.
Lawrence Bishnoi is also the man behind the death threat to Salman Khan.
बिश्नोई, सलमान खान को आपने धमकी दिलवाई? हैं?
Police say the letter sent to the superstar was a publicity stunt by the Bishnoi gang. But there was a bigger conspiracy. Maharashtra Home Minister says that big businessmen and other actors were also on target.
Bishnoi gang है. ये गैंग ने इसका एक फायदा लेने की कोशिश की है. कुछ लोगों को अरेस्ट किया गया है, लेकिन अभी तक इसके बारे में सारी इंफॉर्मेशन या सारी बातें सामने नहीं आई है. पुलिस इसकी जांच कर रही है और कुछ दिन लगेंगे.
Confronted 4 times, evasive all 4 times. But this Lawrence Bishnoi glare tells you all that you need to know about this dreaded gangster. With Arvind Ojha in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
This is where we wrap up the news track tonight. For your time and your trust, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you 8 p.m. tomorrow evening. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye, good night.
during the pandemic, a new billionaire was minted every 30 hours. And now in 2022, every 33 hours, 1 million people are falling into extreme poverty.
Is it time to tax the billionaire club? The pandemic crushed economies, and we can already see its effects on many countries. What you didn't see is that the pandemic created billionaires. The Oxfam report shows that at the rate of 1 every 30 hours, 573 people became new billionaires during the pandemic. On the contrary, Oxfam says that they expect at least 263 million people will crash into extreme poverty at the rate of 1 million people every 33 hours.
Pandemic hit very differently depending on who you were, what country you were in. But things, for example, like vaccine access made a huge difference. So the rich world got vaccines very early on, and most low-income countries still only have 15% rate vaccinations, and that has had implications on health, but also on social and economic consequences.
The pandemic was where the rich grew richer and the poor poorer. In fact, it's surprising that billionaires' wealth has risen more in 24 months of the pandemic than it ever did in 23 years combined. Oxfam said that decades of progress towards reducing poverty is now in reverse. The food shortage is a huge growing concern in many countries.
We see all these problems, this crisis happening, multiple levels of crisis, and it can seem overwhelming. But what we're saying is there's a message of hope in the sense there is money. It's not well distributed. So there are measures that can reduce this inequality. So taxation at low percentages, we're talking 2% for millionaires going up to 5%. And with that, we can raise enough money to address these deep social problems.
The world is reeling through the pandemic and facing challenges that come with the Russia-Ukraine crisis. So is it now time to tax the rich to support the less fortunate?
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices.
You are watching India Today.
So Netflix seems to be having a major problem with passwords being shared, and it's being alleged that if you're going to share your Netflix password beyond your household, Netflix will charge you for it. For the first time in 10 years, Netflix has seen a drop in its subscriber base. They lost something close to 2 lakh subscribers in the first quarter of 2022, and mass password sharing is being touted as one of the major reasons for this. So you've subscribed to Netflix, but your friend hasn't, and you share your password with your friend, he logs in or she logs into it, and they're able to access it as well. Netflix is having a major problem with this because mass password sharing is being touted as one of the major reasons why Netflix has seen a drop in its subscribers for the first time in 10 years. Netflix lost something close to 2 lakh subscribers in the first quarter of 2022, and there are reports which suggest that there is going to be a further drop in its subscriber base, and that's why Netflix is having a major problem. Now, it was recently revealed in one of Netflix shareholder letters that some 100 million freeloading households are making use of Netflix services without paying for it, obviously. And out of these, some 30 million are in the US and Canada. Now, such freeloading households have obviously become a major problem for Netflix, and now it is being alleged that Netflix is trying out a much more strict policy wherein they're going to impose a fee for any extra member who's accessing the same Netflix account from a different household. It could be the equivalent of about $2 to $3 in any country's currency for that extra member who's accessing the same account. Now, there has been a lot of confusion because of these kind of reports which are coming in. First of all, people are very confused about what is the definition of household. Netflix has not commented on this yet. Secondly, there is a lot of confusion about if I have an account and I have the option of logging in from multiple devices, and I share my password with a friend of mine who's logging in from one of those devices, will I be charged for it? As per these reports, yes, I will be. But there is no clarity on